And I'll now welcome representatives from the Norwegian Seafarers Union, the Maritime Union of New Zealand and the International Transport Workers Federation. And for the Hansard record, if you could please state your name and the capacity in which you appear. And Ms Smith, let's start with you, shall we?
My name is Jacqueline Smith, and I am the Maritime Co-ordinator for the International Transport Worker Federation. I'm responsible for the maritime sections, seafarers, dockers, fisheries and inland navigation, and also for the ITF's inspectorate, which is about 140 inspectors worldwide.
My goodness, what do you do in your spare time? Okay. Mr Fleetwood. Hello, Joe.
Thank you, Senator. Just if I can, I'm Joe Fleetwood, National Secretary of the Maritime Union of New Zealand. Just prior, if I can, if I may, I'd like to pay tribute and our respects to the traditional owners of the land. I believe the Nongawa people, past, present and emerging, and also just on behalf of also our condolences to the families that have lost their loved ones, properties through the fires and floods that have been happening in your beautiful country in Australia. So, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Senator.
Thank you, Joe. Mr Hansen.
Yes, my name is Johnny Hansen. I'm the president of the Norwegian Seafarers Union, and we organize mostly the ratings on board the Norwegian merchant fleet and also organize fishers in the deep sea fleet in Norway.
Right, well, thank you very much. You know how this works. We've got the room for till 6:30, so I'm going to ask the three of you to make your opening statements. The floor is yours. Please tell us what you want us to hear. Joe, you want to kick off, mate?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I might start with just a picture tells 1,000 words, and it comes to a lot of the senators that have asked questions about foreign flag vessels trading, the ability there. So pre-1994, that was New Zealand. And that's what it is. Yep. And currently,
that's
today,
your own flag
that's New Zealand flag
yep.
vessels, 94.
Yep.
Currently, as it is today, this is what we have now.
So you'll table for
all foreign. Yeah, I can table that. This is a foreign there. So this was in 2004 when we done the campaign, and from there, nothing's got any better.
So is there any New Zealand ships left? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't go. I should let you finish. Sorry.
We currently have, so 1996 prior there, we had 34 owned and operated New Zealand vessels. Down to about 2003, there was about 19. Currently, there's about maybe 15 flagged and operated vessels. Under the New Zealand government now that we have, current Labor government, we're slowly but surely in growth mode. So we're pushing towards, so we're actually a nation that have gone from having everything that I strongly support what's been said and what supports was be said shortly in Norway, in Canada, England. New Zealand had all of those cabotage laws to the extent exactly what they had, and now currently we have basically nothing. So we're fully. So in New Zealand, we currently had prior to '94 foreign vessel traded on our coast. Exactly what Jim Givens was talking about. If the vessel was available, okay, they could carry it. But if there was no New Zealand vessel available, and they would manned by a foreign flag vessel, they would have to pay New Zealand terms, conditions, and wages to the crews while trading on New Zealand coast. So that was what it was there. So prior to all of that, we retained all of those to the extent we had a lot of, if there was an international vessel, Norwegian vessel, and it had 2 or 3 people got hurt and come off from New Zealand, we would put a New Zealand person on board, we called a New Zealand runner, and that person would sail in a Norwegian vessel around to the extent we had many New Zealand seafarers staying members of the Norwegian Seafarers Union and currently sailing on all their reefer vessels around the world. So those things that we had, and about 92, 94, we had the, in my view, what I say, the disgraceful Shipping and Seamen's Act, Section 198, was imposed on us, and that came into effect. Cabotage was lost, allowing all foreign vessels to trade solely on the New Zealand coast for 28 days. No permits, no visas, no nothing, no application, just give them the open right for 28 days, which currently still is in place today.
It is in place.
In place today, and that's called the Section 198 of the Maritime Transport Act, and that's what it currently is now. Prior to that, we had, as of right, a foreign vessel could come to New Zealand, drop a foreign cargo off, international cargo off, pick up international cargo, go to the next port, drop off international cargo, pick up international cargo, bound for another port in the world. Currently, as it is now, by amending Section 198, foreign vessel can come in, drop off international cargo, pick up international cargo, also pick up New Zealand domestic cargo, and then trade down the coast for the next port to port. Hence, putting all the New Zealand vessels out there. We currently had, there was, as I said, 36 vessels. Prior to that, there was about nearly 60. Union Steamship Company, one of the biggest shipping companies in the world, trading to all the furthest parts of the world, slowly but surely lost. To now, currently as it is now, as I say, we've got no international shipping that comes there, other than our tankers that may travel over to Singapore for dry dock.
So you've got fuel tankers still that are New Zealand flagged?
New Zealand flagged, ASP owned, so Australian company, but New Zealand flagged vessels manned by us.
New Zealand crew?
Yeah, New Zealand crew, 2 brand new vessels, twin hull, double hulled as they have to be now, so they're there. So so there's a lot of things like hearing a lot of the questions that were asked, that have come across. So we've gone from, yes, retaining all of that, to losing it and slowly but surely still not having it now to this day. So we currently have we're an island nation solely reliant on international shipping. We had the earthquakes in Christchurch.
You did, not once but twice, didn't you?
Yes, twice, but the first one and both the second one, only the New Zealand ship owners that were currently on our coast now were the only ones that carried emergency supplies to our ports for free. No questions asked. They dropped off their cargo and then picked up emergency supplies and took it so they could keep our communities going. And that was not one international ship owner, which we're currently solely reliant on. There was no offer.
Can I just, why don't we just do something different? Why don't we stick with Joe for 10 minutes, we'll ask a few questions, and then we'll go over to Johnny, we'll come to you, Jacqueline, we'll ask you to do your own mistakes, then we're not all over the place. Is that all right? So tell me, Joe, I'm worried about the skill set as well as the jobs, okay? So how's your skill set in New Zealand now? If there was some, the stars and the planets and the moon all lined up and someone said, you know what, we're going to start bringing back cabotage and enforcing it, and we're going to tighten up on the exploitation of the temporary visa system, do you have the skilled workforce ready to go?
Yeah, well, no, we don't see... Difference is that we don't have the temporary visa system or anything.
I'm sorry, I thought you said there was a 28
no, as of right. Oh, as of right. As of right, a foreign operator can trade on our coast for 28 days, regardless, and then they leave. And they're there. See, so, but our Prime Minister's slowly working on it. She gets it. Okay. But the only way, our trainings, it would be fair to say we probably average about 55, the age of 55.
For your seafarers?
Yep. We've had no training whatsoever, other than an individual seafarer having to go and pay $5,000 to $7,000 out of their own pocket for qualifications and things like that. So, it's just not there. We had no industry. We had industry training boards, all gone. Nothing. You see. So that's the big difference that we have. And currently, as it is now, what it is that we actually rely solely on the Maritime Union of Australia. That is our supply of experienced and skilled labour. By the interchangeable labour there. Currently we have offshore, oil and gas, we have ferries, everything in New Zealand. So we may have 1,500 jobs with 800, 900 qualified seafarers, and we backfill with Australian seafarers. That's currently as it is now, what we're doing now. Our oil and gas industry currently is now, we have half our vessels, there may be 12 or 15, are manned, and some probably over the next 2 weeks will be fully manned with Australian seafarers working on our coast. And that's protecting our backyard. So that's where we are. That's the dire straits in New Zealand as it is now, and that's our training, as we solely reliant on the Maritime Union of Australia, and Australia supplying us qualified seafarers.
So I suppose, Joe, while we're in the ANZUS Alliance and we go back to the ANZACs and before and we're all good mates, that's great, but there's this warning to be fired across the bow of Australia that if we got ourselves into that situation and our mates across the ditch certainly can't help us out, that could have dire consequences, and I'm not being dramatic here, the dire consequences for Australia, both environmentally, strategically, defence, national security, and the like. So, look, Senators, any questions to Joe? No. Senator McDonald?
Can I just understand, so how many New Zealand flag vessels do you have now? Roughly?
Maybe 15.
Yeah, right.
Maybe 15, and yet... But in saying 15, that's like 15 New Zealand fully manned vessels. But fully flagged, maybe 8.
Right.
8.
Well, they
yeah.
could change overnight with a phone call,
Yeah.
couldn't it?
So
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the 2 New Zealand flag Australian-owned ships you're including in that 15?
Within New Zealand manned,
Yeah,
yeah. So that would be
okay.
15,
Yeah.
but fully New Zealand flag, because we currently have 5 vessels on the Cook Strait,
Yeah.
trading from the north, between the north and south,
Oh, yeah.
and 2 of the ferries are British flagged. So British flagged, but New Zealand crewed.
And the ferries
Yeah.
run between both
Yeah.
North and South
Yeah.
Island, is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's the they're currently between that little stretch in between the north and south.
I took one of those ferries with my kids about
Yep.
2 years ago. It's terrific.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. But
Except that I get horribly seasick, so it's
So it wasn't that terrific
embarrassing,
for you?
isn't it? Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. It's just extraordinary, isn't it? We get so many New Zealand. We rely on you for all our abattoirs and our butcher shops. So many Kiwis come over, but it's the reverse for the
seafarers, yeah.
seafarers.
And I think, if I may say, Joe, that the most important thing, and to, of course, Dave before, Deidre and of course, Jim, the warning signs are there. And
Yes.
it would be remiss of us as a nation. People think that I'm just doing the bidding of the MUA and the AAMP, and it couldn't be further from the truth. I seriously am concerned, because we are an island nation. You know, and for us to just give away, if we fall into the situation, we're heading there very quickly, where New Zealand is, on the pretense that we think, you see, my problem, and I shouldn't rant because there's more important people in the room, but our seafarers are like our truckies. They're out there. No one sees them leave to go to work. No one knows what they do overnight. No one sees them come back. But crikey, without them. And we can have the best product in the world, which we do. And we're proud about our sustainability and our agriculture and our food production. But what the hell are we opening up if we kill off one of the most vital industries, let alone the skill set that we're going to lose on the way through? Anyway, I've had my rant. I should be over that side of the table.
Just ask. Yeah, that's
Sorry.
right. Can I just ask one more question? So, what you said that it used to be that you, if ships came into New Zealand waters, that you had to, they had to take on New Zealand terms and conditions.
Yeah, if there was no New Zealand vessel or crew, very similar to what Dave and Jim had mentioned,
Right.
available to take up those positions, that's what happened. The foreign vessel would have to pay to their crew New Zealand terms and conditions while they were on our coast,
Right.
and to the destination that they become.
But
because
that
they've-
changed.
Yeah, that changed in, when Section 198 was imposed at about 1992, somewhere around there.
And
yeah.
we've got the similar situation here. You see, it's the thin end of the wedge. Okay,
Yeah.
because shipping owners will not invest because we know it's going to go, because governments and bureaucracies will tick off. And anyway, you've heard that from me. More importantly here.
But look on the bright side, Glenn, we've got a whole generation of university graduates with about $60 billion in HECS debt who are very good at drinking coffee and eating muffins. Fantastic.
I tell you, I'm an alumni from Murdoch. I did 2 weeks moving the veterinary clinic in. So let's go back to Johnny. I'm really thanks, Joe. Johnny, I'm very keen to hear Norway's story, please.
Yeah,
We are.
thank you very much, and thank you for letting me speak for defending cabotage in Australian waters. As if you look at the report from the SRI, Norway is one of the countries that have no cabotage registration, which is barely true, because when the government buys services from companies for transportation of passengers and goods at the coast, fjord crossing ferries and so on, there is a demand on Norwegian flag and Norwegian conditions on board. But when it comes to cabotage transport elsewhere, there is no regulation. Norway is a shipping nation, one of the biggest, and I think you know that there is a lot of Norwegian flagged vessels operating in Australian waters. Mm-hmm. And the good thing is that there are Australian crew, and you have some of them was active in this relief work here 2-3 weeks ago.
It was a brilliant effort.
So that makes me proud that the Norwegian flag vessels with Canadian crew was first on the spot. That's good. And then we do not have cabotage, and the Norwegian fleet are everywhere. I don't know how many Norwegian flag vessels there are, more than 1,000 Norwegian flagged, with 2 international register and the ordinary register. And then there are about 1,500 deep sea controlled vessel with a lot of other flags, what we call FOCs in the
What do you call them?
flag of convenience,
Sorry.
flag vessels.
Yep.
So the Norwegian shipping as such is a very big and is global. I go back to 1987 when the second register was introduced. That was introduced to give the Norwegian companies the possibility to fly the Norwegian flag, to have the tonnage under Norwegian flag and Norwegian legislation. But of course they could recruit crew from globally on conditions that is not applicable in Norwegian waters. That's why they had a limitation about trade in Norwegian waters, in cabotage in Norway, to protect the ordinary registry that should do that kind of trade. The problem is that some ship owners, or I will say most ship owners, want to earn as much money as possible. So if they can change flag, change crew, and operate the same routes, they do that. And that is what we have experienced in Norway now, that a lot of Norwegian ship owners change to Bahamas, other flags, change the crew from Norwegian to international. And the development has been escalating since 2003, where then 80% of the transport in Norwegian water was done by Norwegian flag vessels with Norwegian crew.
Right.
Today it is 20%.
Wow.
So that means it is more or less taken over by international conditions and international flag with Norwegian companies behind. And that's our concern. And when we realized this was happening, we started to mobilize in order to have some kind of cabotage legislation in place. And Norway being a part of the European Economic Area, we cannot ask for a legislation telling that we should have Norwegian on board and Norwegian flag vessels. We cannot, according to the EU legislation, go that far. But we can ask for fair competition, equal conditions on board. So we have been working to get a legislation in place that demands that all trade in Norwegian waters on the continental shelf and in the economic area should be on Norwegian conditions.
So how's that going? Are you getting traction there, Johnny?
Yeah, to go on, I would say we had arguments from both the government and the shipping companies that this was illegal. You have flag state jurisdiction, you have the EU legislation, and you have a lot of international conventions that not Norway have ratified that told us that this is not possible. So we then started a campaign telling the mayors around the coast, because Norway have a long coast and there are a lot of small communities depending partly on Norwegian seafarers. And we asked them to put pressure on the government in order to get this hurdle mapped out. So last year, after 6 to 8 years fight, the parliament instructed the government to conduct a survey to see whether it was legally possible to ask for Norwegian conditions on any flag vessel operating in Norwegian waters. And the government made one survey, and the trade union movement, with myself in the charge, had the university in Oslo do the same survey with the same mandate, and both reports concluded that there is no obstacles, legal obstacles to do that.
Wow.
So
their next trick?
Well, you have to learn when you are living, and when you are threatened, you start fighting, and that's what we have been doing now, because we see the threat against Norwegian seafarers. Now, when 80% of the trade in domestic waters are done by foreigners, that's a threat. So that was last year, and the legal ground is there, and now is the political one. And with the existing government that we have in Norway, they are not waving their flag and say, yes, we're going to ask for Norwegian conditions. So we are now lobbying the parliament, trying to have some pressure on the government. And there is a proposal in the parliament that will be discussed in 2 weeks' time about this asking for Norwegian conditions to have level playing field. I'm not sure whether there will be a majority supporting it, but at least we will know then until next election that will come up next year who we can trust supporting us.
Can I just jump in and ask some questions,
jump
Johnny? The
in.
thing is, I'm
Anyway.
intrigued because Norway's been a shipping nation a lot longer than us, a hell of a lot longer than us. So has this been a demise of the Norwegian domestic shipping industry over many years, or it has just never ever been able to hang its hat on saying we've looked after our shipbuilding industry, our seafarers, our stevedoring industry, our export and import, and our domestic trade? And has Norway ever been?
You know, in
Well,
Norway we have a small country, 4.5, maybe 5 million citizens, and there are more than 100,000 workplaces in what we call the Maritime cluster.
100,000 workers or workplaces?
Workplaces.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
and you can say you have the shipyards, you have the producing of equipment to ships, and those who are exporting this everywhere, and 90% of those companies involved in this industry says that without the Norwegian maritime experience
Yeah.
on board the vessels, we couldn't compete internationally.
But you just can't do it in your domestic ports.
Well,
You can't in your domestic trade.
You know, the sea experience is crucial to tell the producers of technical equipment on board the vessel what function and what doesn't function. So the cluster has been kind of helping each other until lately, and I wouldn't go that far that the money talks has hidden in the shipping companies. So they are.
Oh, we're not here to protect the shipping companies around the world.
We are here to
now, so.
protect seafarers in the national trade. And if we are not able to protect national trade, we will not have the experienced seafarers to tell the rest of the industry how to operate, and the whole cluster will fall apart. That is our fear, and that message is what we tell the public in Norway now. So try to get this in place. As I said, we cannot ask for Norwegian seafarers on the vessels, but we can have level playing field, and then of course will be the companies that choose whether they will have a New Zealand seafarer or Norwegian seafarer.
Well,
that's fair competition. That's no problem.
From what it's worth, on this side of the table, Johnny, I don't have an argument with you, and I won't hold up because I know other senators may have questions, but how big an industry is Ro-Ro to Norway?
Well, we have Ro-Ro ferries going out to Europe. It's not very big.
Okay.
There are 4 Norwegian flag vessels going out of Norwegian ports, and there are
But
Danish.
they're flagged, but they're not crewed.
They are Norwegian crewed as well.
Oh, they're Norwegian crewed. Oh, so that's good.
We had a fight
Okay.
a couple of years ago where one of the biggest company tried to reflag the vessels from NOR, the ordinary, to NIS, and replace most of the crew with foreign crews. But we fought it against, and we won in the parliament. So that's
You kept that crew?
Yeah.
Oh, we should need a secret so we could embarrass those crooks and thieves at BHP and Bluescope Steel how to do that. But anyway, I was just having another rant because you know I don't like BHP and Bluescope. Okay.
I'm good.
Senator Rennick, did you? Now, I think you've got a question, haven't you? Senator Jacqueline?
Johnny, Tim, we heard earlier from New Zealand about their training, and obviously people having to pay around 7,000 New Zealand dollars, I'm assuming, for training. What's the experience in Norway?
Well, we have actually a lot of young people who want to go to sea, and we have the system in place, and they are trained by the official. They go to school and they go out and have practice on board vessels. unfortunately, that goes up and down with the oil and gas prices and the oil and gas industry, because that's a major industry for late years. The lucky thing is that when the oil went down, the aquaculture went up. So those who was laid off in the oil and gas or the offshore industry had job opportunities when it comes to aquaculture vessels, which you also have Norwegian flag vessels in Tasmanian waters, manned with Australian seafarers. That's a good thing.
So to get training, who do you go to get training? Do you have to go to an education institution to be trained
we'll
up?
go to, there are, I think it's 15 different basic training schools in the country, and you have there for 2 years, and then you have 2 years practice on board the vessel, and then you can go further to become captain and officers. That's another level of training.
And what's the cost?
For the students,
Yes.
probably they have to pay, if they have to stay away from home, they have to pay the rent housing, but the training is free. Schooling is free at that level.
Joe, just to go back to you, is that a similar situation in New Zealand, that you have a couple of years of training? I mean,
Yeah.
what does $7,000 get you?
It can cost up to 7,000.
Okay.
But once qualified, there's the renewal of your tickets every 5 years. There's another $1,500 to $1,800, and that's for experience, for qualified seafarers. So it carries on and on. But we have training schools that are there, but they're only if they can fill up a class of say 25, around there 20, well then they'll run the course. But then if they can't find those numbers, well, no course gets run. And you see, so then the courses that get run are more than likely, be fair to say, that are solely reliant on foreign students coming in and selling those tickets and qualifications, prior to New Zealand, young New Zealand workers doing it. So,
And just very quickly, and they're run by the MUA, or are they run by?
They're run by probably fair to say non-government NGOs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that are in New Zealand, and it's reliant on, foreign kids coming in and paying the big money to get all the training qualifications, opposed to a young New Zealand worker not being able to do it. So.
And not to split hairs, that's for our seafarers who
Yep.
are absolutely integral to the whole supply chain. That's before we start talking to the engineers, deck officers,
Yep,
and
yeah.
skippers, and and it's just
Yeah,
it's
that's
worse
for
and
all
worse.
seafarers. I talk about all
Yeah.
seafarers on board a vessel.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I just want to, look, I must say, I have to have another declaration, declare an interest here to the committee, that I'm now a lot more experienced since I last seen you, Joe. I did the Tasmanian Achiever 2 from Melbourne to Burnie, but the MUA won't give me my ratings. But anyway, I was on the ship for all of 12 hours and slept for about 7. Now, most importantly, Jacqueline, thank you very much from ITF. No, don't worry. I'm going to give you 10 minutes at least before we get kicked out. Please, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senators. So I'm coming from a little bit of an international aspect, because now we've heard the national aspect. And of course, my colleagues here are members of the ITF. They're affiliated to the ITF as unions. The ITF, through the affiliated unions, represent about 2 million seafarers internationally. The ITF has what we call a flag and convenience campaign.
What campaign?
Flag and convenience
Yeah, sorry,
campaign.
yep.
That started in 1948. And that campaign had 2 strands. One was a political, and that was to try to chase vessels flagging out back into national flags with national owners, a genuine link, and national seafarers. And the second was for those that were under flag of convenience, that those seafarers had decent working and living and wage conditions. So throughout those years, 1948 until we are here today, we see that the idea of chasing flag of convenience back into national flag is not necessarily, it's still there as a very important political goal, but at the same time we see a lot of national flags that to a certain extent operate very similar to flag of convenience. So that's why about 4 or 5 years ago we decided, or the affiliates decided and the committee decided, that we needed to ensure that seafarers coming from developing countries and developed countries were able to work within their own national trade, because that, of course, maintained the important skills that they have that's important for their country. Now, as you know, and I don't have to tell you, Australia is probably one of the biggest shipping task countries in the world. So for internationally, is a bit odd that there is a decrease or a downward spiral when it comes to the skills and competencies that we believe that you absolutely should have. The Flag and Convenience campaign, as I said, we have 140 inspectors worldwide. There are 4 of them that are here in Australia. I'm sure that you know Dean Summers very well,
Absolutely,
and Matt Purcell, and Sarah McGuire, and Keith McCarson.
Yep.
Because they do an amazing job. There are 4. And our inspectors worldwide, on an average, every year, they're able to get back pay or owed wages to seafarers in the amount of 30 to 40 million US dollars.
That's not an insignificant amount of
Now,
money.
that is a significant amount.
That's right.
And that continues despite the Maritime Labour Convention 2006
This is
came
terrible.
into force. So, and if you think that our inspectors, they're able to do around 10,000 ship visits per year, I'm sure that if they were able to do twice as much, they would most likely be able to get even more or uncover.
Absolutely.
And that's when you're starting to talk about unfair competition, and that's when you start talking about exploitation, and that happens within your waters.
Yep.
I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but there is a company.
You should. I really want, because if you don't, I will. You just whisper it to me,
There
and
is
I'll
a
tell you right
company
now on
that
the
is a
microphone.
charterer that has terminated the agreements and kicked off the Australian seafarers. And then when we wrote to them and made them aware of the fact that the ships that they're bringing in are exploiting the seafarers, they say, well, number one, we're just the charterer, which they still are an economic direct employer. And then the second one was that those ships are covered by the Maritime Labour Convention. Well, we wrote back to them and made them aware of the fact that the Maritime Labour Convention only says that a seafarer has to be paid. It does not specify how much a seafarer should be paid. It says a seafarer has to be paid and should not be on board for longer than 12 months at a time. Now,
Right, yeah.
I think that is disgraceful within Australia if you're using, especially a company that earns as much as this company does, is exploiting the
Why don't
seafarers
you
in
let
that
it-
manner.
why
Because
don't
there
you-
is, sorry,
There is some action going or something like that?
pardon?
Is there action going where it would put the ITF in a terrible position? I respect it if that's the case. But when I find out, I will mention who they are. They're applying their trade on Australia's shores.
Okay, this company is BHP.
Oh, see, Jacqueline, I was just
I don't
winding down. I
know
was
if you
starting
were-
to settle myself, and now you've fired me up again. And Andrew McLeod, the CEO there, that has just disappeared on his white steed with his millions and millions. Well done, Andrew McLeod. And I'll start you absolute lowy. But anyway,
So being covered by the
80 Australian jobs
Maritime
went.
Labour Convention does not guarantee other than a seafarer has to be paid. A seafarer can be paid $1, and then some say, well,
Yeah.
there is the ILO minimum wage for seafarers. Now that is a recommendation, and that is in 2020, it's at $625 US per month.
So, Jacqueline, can I just come in there just for the benefit of other senators? It's a case of, here's this real weak, pathetic law, but it's a case of catch us if you can, because I know the fine work that the ITF inspectors do, and I've been very close to Keith and Dean for many, many years when I was in my previous iteration of my life, when Ian Bray and I were a lot skinnier, and he had more hair, but he's not in the room. Is that the case? Catch us if you can, because we know you jack up a ship. That's what you do around the world, and then you don't let it out, and then they come good and write a cheque, and we don't know if those poor buggers actually get the money or give it back to them, because we don't know what happens once they get out in international waters. Is that fair to say?
We do have situations where we get the money on behalf of the seafarers, and then once they go someplace else, they're pressurized to pay the money back to the companies.
I've heard all that.
So,
Yeah.
Is this the iron ore? Is this BHP iron ore?
No, sorry. BHP, we had our own iron ships. These are the ones that kicked our Aussie seafarers off in international waters, replaced them with exploited foreign seafarers, still carting BHP and BlueScope Steel's products. Right. And to the extent, I'm sorry, Jacqueline, where those poor exploited buggers coming up the gangplank came into because these Aussies were still in their cabins, correct me if I'm wrong, and even said, could we have your old boots that you don't need? And we've got the big Australian, and it makes me want to vomit even saying that, okay, telling us what a great employer they are. Yeah, well, I think you get the picture.
But
Senator
one of the
Bragg.
things
And I'm
is
happy
just-
for BHP to come back
Is
and
it just
challenge
iron ore,
me.
or they at coal as well? or-
No, it's our iron ore boats, the two iron boats,
It's
which are
iron ore.
Australian flagged, Australian crude.
But one
Sorry,
of the things
Jacqueline,
that
I'll stall you.
one of the things that they're saying is that they no longer operate the ships. They're charterers, but
Yeah.
even though they're not,
Right.
they can't get away from their it's a supply chain responsibility. So within the ITF, we say they are an economic employer because they are the ones who are pressurizing those ships that they're chartering in to only pay the crew so and so much money. So, and that's where we find that it's easy to just contract it out and then wash your hands of responsibility, but that shouldn't be the case.
And
They
see,
should be
Jacqueline,
responsible.
I'm sorry, Jacqueline, but this is the fine work of the ITF and the affiliates. And this is not the union dog whistling stuff. This is serious stuff, really serious. And we want to talk about, and you have all these experiences, and we've heard it from Jim before, and we've heard it from Johnny, we've heard it from Dave. I mean, we want to talk about national security. We want to talk about, oh, aren't we wonderful, because we want to look after our young ones coming through so you can have a hex deck and, you know, and not do anything. There you go, Senator, you and I aren't far apart. But when we start putting it all into the realities of what happens in the world, it's nothing shorter than disgraceful. It is the hypocrisy and two-facedness. So, but you have all these examples, and I want you to provide everyone you can in the short term, but also, Jacqueline, when you leave, whatever else you need us to know as a committee, the senators need to see all this. And when you link it into Australians and you start mentioning those three letters that start with B and end with P that I don't want to talk about anymore, it gets even more, the reality is that there are a bunch of crooks trading around our coast.
But it's just it's a reality that the only ones that are benefiting from using flag of convenience vessel are the ship owners. That is what it is. And it's ironic to think that you have over 10 countries that are landlocked countries that have registers. Now, why is that? Why would they even have? You know, you have Bolivia, Mongolia, you have Switzerland, Luxembourg, Austria, just to name some. And they do that because they want to, it brings revenue, number one, and it also brings them power within the International Maritime Organization. Because like Panama, Liberia, Bahamas, they have huge tonnage, and they can set the scenes for those regulations. Now, of course, Australia is represented, Norway is represented, New Zealand, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the weight of the tonnage that is going to be heard within the IMO. So, and I do believe that there needs to be serious and not flag inconvenience, because it is, and I know that some ship owners and even some registers say that they find it offensive. And I said, what's offensive about the word flag inconvenience? Because ship owners flag in there out of convenience. They flag in there because they don't pay taxes, they don't have to, there's very little labor law, they don't have to deal with the unions, there's really no protection for those seafarers in that manner on a national level, so it's out of convenience. I said, I'm not calling it, I mean, call it Donald Duck, I don't care, but it is, they're flagging it out of convenience. So I think that Australia, they absolutely should have national seafarers, they should have national flag vessels, because you are a big shipping task country, so.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I wasn't trying to check my messages. I was trying to Google ships of shame, but I got fat fingers, and it's just. But remember the inquiry that was done in this Parliament, and I can't remember who didn't. I can't remember what it was, but I've got to tell you, since then it's just gone. The custard has got worse. So this is a huge thing. Senator Jacqueline, did you have any questions?
Just was intrigued about you getting money back on behalf of
Sure, did you want any
seafarers.
questions?
How
I'd like to
successful
start.
have you been? And are there other examples? I mean, how do you go about dealing with these companies and trying to get the money back on behalf of the seafarers? I'm intrigued to know more.
So in the majority of countries in the world, you can actually arrest the ship. And that usually fascinates, especially when you have financial institutions starting to be the real owner of the ship, but then it's in a management company and then to a charterer. But you can arrest the ship. There is, in the majority of countries, if a seafarer is owed wages, then you can arrest the ship. And that's so that our inspectors or even our affiliates will follow the regulations within their country and arrest the ship. So you go to the police, and then they actually have to pay the money, prove that they paid the money before the ship is released. So you can't do that with a bus or if someone's working in a factory, but you can do that with ships. So that's what usually happens, that if they won't pay, then we start the legal process of arresting the ship until they've paid that money. And I know that some ship owners and some registers say, oh, well, if they've just been delayed in payment with a couple of weeks, you say that is owed wages. But that's not what we do, because we follow what was in the MLC with abandoned seafarers. So it's a minimum 3 months before, if they haven't been paid for 3 months, then we will.
So 3 months is they've got to pay.
Yeah.
Are there any stats, oh, I could be wrong, but are there any statistics over the last 12 months, 18 months about how many people or companies have been owing money?
There is a ILO database, but not
Yeah.
everything is reported in, and you have to remember that we're basically the ones doing that.
Yeah.
Because even though you do have port state controls in other countries, they're still getting used to the fact that they're not just dealing with the hardware, the technical aspect of it, but also the labor aspect of it. And in some countries, our inspectors actually train the port state control to be able to identify when the seafarers are not being paid and how it's being mathematical jugglery on board. So, but there is a website, and I can send over the link so
That'd be
you can
good.
see
Thank
those
you.
that are abandoned
Yeah.
and who hasn't been paid. And
That would be great, but also I'll put the challenge, not the challenge, put the request out to the MUA, because you would have those stats, what the ITF have done here in Australia, so that's going to be handy as well. Senator Rennick, you wanted to make a statement?
Yeah, Johnny, it was interesting how you said that a lot of the Norwegian youth want to go shipping, because in this country, like anything we try to do, so whether it's be forestry, farming, mining, manufacturing, is vilified. And we actively encourage our kids to go off to university, and we make it very difficult to work, for them to work. So you drove with your father in a truck. So by the time you finished school, you were already used to working on weekends, right? You would have worked on weekends when you grew up. I worked on weekends when I grew up. I grew up on a farm, I worked on weekends, and I was ready to go. Right, so we have got an attitude problem in our country, number one. Number two, all those little micro countries that register the shipping, that's because they have no tax. So in Australia, we have an onshore tax rate of 30 cents and an offshore tax rate of 0. So we actively encourage. So when BHP went offshore 20 years ago and they listed in London, that was so that they could, and then bought the asset in South Africa, became BHP Billiton, that's so they could shift their equity out of Melbourne and into an offshore island, and then they pay the money offshore, and they get a 30-cent tax deduction for it here, and they pay much less, depending on country tax treaty between 0 and 10, right? So we've got to raise that withholding tax to level the playing field, because I don't believe in free markets. I've made that quite clear, but I do believe in markets. But ultimately, there's only two outcomes in a market: you're either making money or losing money. So we've got to make sure that our responsibility as politicians is to make sure the Australian people and in your own countries, your people are making money and being rewarded for effort, right? And number three, and I hate superannuation, and I'll tell you why, because we've got $600 billion invested offshore. Now, when we sold the Darwin Port, why didn't the industry super funds or any super funds buy it? How did that just get sold off to foreigners? And we've got to make sure that with our super, it gets reinvested in Australia. And I said the same with the dairy industry, like it's all foreign owned. So where are our super funds, including industry funds, buying Australian assets? Because if our super won't invest the capital in Australia, then we turn around and wonder why Australian companies won't employ labour in Australia. So so there's three things that we could put down to help make it competitive.
Just if I can, Senator.
Sure.
Just about the super, were the Australian super funds offered the first right, as of right, to buy those?
Well, I don't know. So
Yeah,
the way it happened with the Darwin Port, my understanding of it is, it was
I
actually
think they
sold by
were.
the state government. It's another one of these classic federalism problems we have in this country, whereby it was sold before anyone knew about it. Now, it's been fixed now in the sense that Foreign Investment Review Board has also included state assets in there.
Yeah.
And I should also point out that when the Newcastle port was sold, this was an article in the Bloomberg called Nickel and Diming, the port fees went up by 60%, I think, in the first 9 months. Which is why you should never sell monopolistic infrastructure assets, because they can just...
Good point, because it's what Jim raises too. There's no protection there at all.
Good thing there is, welcome to New Zealand.
Well, on that, thank you, Senator Rennick. Can I just take this opportunity to sincerely thank our international visitors and our guests. We do hope, and thank you for your kind words, all of you, of the terrible situation we have found ourselves while our country is burning. but we do appreciate your sincere thoughts and best wishes. But, you know, I mean, to have experts and international visitors from as far away as London, Canada, US, Norway, New Zealand and Willagee, that's for you, Ian. All right, good on you, mate. But we do really appreciate it, and I do hope that your visit to Australia is fruitful, and I can tell you this, I look forward to annoying you on many more occasions in your nation or when you come to ours. Thank you very, very much. Now to the most important people in the room, Hansen Broadcasting, thank you so much, as always. And to Jerry, to you and Trish and your brilliantly hard-working crew, thank you so much. The committee, that concludes today's hearing, and the committee now stands adjourned. Thank you.